Welcome into the Viking Central podcast. I'm here with Ryan today. We're gonna do something a little bit different, something a little bit more fun. A lot of draft talk, a lot of quarterback talk. We're gonna just refresh a little bit and have a fun little topic here today. But before we get into it, I do want to shout out our sponsor. That's Badass Wood Art. You can use code VC15 at checkout for 15% off your order. I actually have one of his pieces that he gave to me right here. So this is a custom skull sign. They're absolutely amazing, like really well built. Like this item is amazing. His name is Luis. You can find him on Twitter and Facebook. That's Badass Wood Art, or you can go on Google and just type in That's Badass Wood Art, and his Facebook page will pop up. His website will pop up. Yeah, you can just go over there. Again, use code VC15 at checkout for 15% off your order, and he will get you hooked up. All right, Ryan. Like I said, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to kind of do our Mount Rushmore, our top 5 players in franchise history. Now, this is an opinion, obviously, so we're all not going to be right. This is an opinion, but at the same time, this is who we think are the top 5 greatest players in franchise history. And then we're going to have a little bit of an honorable mention for you as well, a player or two in that sense as well.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Ryan, you want to start out with your number 5?
Yeah, we could start out. I just want to also kind of preface by saying, my criteria for this. I think that time spent in the franchise matters a lot because there's going to be a lot of guys too and there's going to be a lot of guys that obviously would be an all-time player in the NFL, but maybe didn't play as long for the Vikings. Or, there's going to be guys too. I'll say this: if I didn't watch a whole lot of them growing up, it was, I was born in '88. Times before that, it's kind of tough. Not to say, obviously, they don't belong on the top 5 greatest Vikings of all time. They certainly do, and so you'll see, some of that. But if I leave off a guy like, well, I don't want to give anything away, but if I leave a guy off that you think should be on there, just come rip me a new one on Twitter. All right. We'll leave it at that.
That's what social media is for. Yeah.
All right. So having said that, at my number 5, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. John Randall. John Randall at number 5, Hall of Fame, defensive tackle, 2010, one of the best undrafted free agents of all time, 5-time Pro Bowler. He was 5-time All-Pro, first team All-Pro, and once a second team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. He's 10th all-time in career sacks, and that's as a defensive tackle, remember. 15 and a half sacks in 1997. And something I always love the story about John Randall is that he couldn't get signed by anyone, and the Vikings gave him a shot, but they said, "You're too small. We need you to get bigger. We need you to be at least 250 pounds." Well, he knew he was about to weigh in, and he knew he was like about 10 pounds short. He was at the hardware store, and he bought a chain that he then fastened with a lock to himself and wore his sweats over it, and then went and weighed himself and weighed in at 250 pounds. And had he not done that, he never even would have been on the team. That's one of the craziest, awesome stories. And then I think it was like Peyton's Places, some Peyton Manning interview, he like admitted that, and it always blew me away. So my number 5, John Randall.
I love that pick, to be honest with you. One of the most biggest characters in franchise history. He's just a dog. You got after it. We need someone like that in our defensive line, like today. Like he'd be perfect. We need that tenacity. And I'm so glad he's still like in the franchise. Like he's still active and everything like that. Like he welcomes some of our free agents and everything like that. But I love him at number 5 for sure.
Now I need yours.
Yeah. So my number 5, some people might think this is a little like not high enough, but it is Adrian Peterson. I have Adrian Peterson at my number 5.
Okay.
Obviously, 2012 MVP, one of the most pure runners like in NFL history, and he's one of the last like pure runners. Like you don't see those, every down backs anymore. Derrick Henry's probably like the last one maybe where he's like a true 3-down back, but they're kind of becoming extinct a little bit. But it's Adrian Peterson's vision, his speed, his strength, his cutting, like second to none. Just an incredible football player. And that was like right when I like grew up. That's right when like I fell in love with the Vikings and everything like that. So obviously, and my last name's Peterson, so I had jersey. So yeah, he's one of my favorite players of all time. So yeah, he's my number 5. Again, people probably maybe have him higher on the list. Maybe they don't have him on the list at all, but I think he definitely deserves to be up there. Just again, I'd always come back to that 2012 season where he ran for 2,097 yards after his ACL the year before, where people never thought he'd be the same, and somehow he got better. So number 5 is Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, soon to be Hall of Famer Adrian Peterson,
for sure,
has to be.
Yes, for sure.
Guys, incredible, and 7th overall draft pick, 2007. I remember watching that draft with a buddy, and I was just so hyped when they picked him out of Oklahoma. Honestly. So,
no, I was too. I remember a couple months before the draft. I don't remember if you watched that Fiesta Bowl against Boise State. That's where I kind of truly fell in love with Adrian Peterson.
Was that
even before he was a Viking?
Ian Johnson game?
Yep, that's the Statue of Liberty play and the hook and ladder player.
Yep. He goes and proposes to his girlfriend.
Yep.
Yeah,
one of the craziest college football games ever.
Yeah, that game was nuts.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Awesome. All right, Ryan, your number 4?
My number 4 is Adrian Peterson.
I love
it. I mean, we just touched on it. He's definitely a Hall of Famer. Will be soon. 5th in all time in rushing, behind Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders. Other guys, Frank Gore, which is more of a longevity thing in my opinion, but still very good player, Frank Gore. But 3rd all time in rushing touchdowns, behind only Marcus Allen, Danian Tomlinson, and Emmitt Smith. Career average of 4.6 yards per carry, which is insane. And he holds the record for the most rushing yards in a single game, which he did in his rookie year against the Chargers, which was also in that same game. I'll never forget, Antonio Cromartie set the record for longest return, 109 yards.
Another crazy game.
Yeah, that game was awesome. Sure. But yeah, MVP 2012, that season was crazy. The craziest part about that season, in my opinion, was that he was on a pitch count for like the first 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, I would say. And I mean, he started the season out. I looked it up because I wanted to know, but he started the season out with 84 yards in week 1, 60 yards in week 2, 86 yards in week 3, 102 in week 4, 88 in week 5, 79 in week 6. Like, it wasn't until 6 weeks in until he started to pop off. You know what I mean? And I mean, don't get me wrong, 80 yards, 102 yards. It's not like it's anything to scoff at. Of course, good rushing totals, but to almost set the single season rushing record and having started like that for 6 weeks is crazy. I mean, he had then, as the season progressed, he ran for 210 against the Packers the first time they played at 199, where if they would have given him the ball one more time, he probably would have broke the record, let's be honest. Right. But they were in field goal range, and it was time to win the game and win the division instead of give him the record, which, but we'll all remember that day. We'll all remember that game, and we were all counting down with everyone else. And it was insane. I mean, you're right, though. Even 4 and 5 is probably some people's number 1, Adrian Peterson, and rightfully so. If he's your number 1, I don't blame you. Oh, also, in that 2012 season, and this to me is why it's the greatest season ever by a running back. Eric Dickerson, who set the record, had 379 rushing attempts. Adrian Peterson that year had 348 rushing attempts. That's like a full game's worth of rushing attempts. Yep. You're telling me if he didn't have another game, he wouldn't have broke the record.
I for sure would have.
I mean, yes. So, yeah, and obviously he's my favorite running back of all time. He was just the most dominant force of power, speed, elusiveness, and he'll just run you right over. He's the best back ever, in my opinion. So yeah,
I agree. And like
my number 4, Adrian Peterson.
Yep. I agree. He did all this with, like, what quarterback? His best quarterback was 2009 Brett Favre. Otherwise, he was carrying Christian Ponder to the playoffs. The game he had 296. I think Brooks Bollinger played the majority of the game at quarterback. Like Brooks Bollinger, a lot of people don't even know who that is.
Yeah,
like they were stacking the box, 8-9 people in the box, and it didn't matter. Like it was insane to watch. And obviously, that's not today's football anymore. But at the same time, like I kind of miss those days because it was just amazing to watch him do what he does best. But
shout out Tony Richardson.
Heck yes.
Leading the way.
Richardson, baby. Yes, sir. So I had him at number 5. Ryan had him at number 4. So my number 4, I'm going to go a little bit more old school. I'm going to go Randall McDaniel at my number 4.
Love that.
Another player that we would love to plug into today's team because he's one of the best guards like of all time. Like 12 straight Pro Bowls. And that's when Pro Bowls actually meant something. They don't mean anything anymore. Obviously, it's a popularity contest for the most part. 7 All-Pro honors, and that's first team All-Pro. And then obviously he's a Hall of Famer in 2009. Just was amazing. Again, the tenacity, just an amazing football player. A guy that, just came to work every single day. And again, like I said, the longevity, 12 straight Pro Bowls, 7 first-team All-Pros. He did it for a long time at a super high level. Randall McDaniel at my number 4.
I love Randall McDaniel. As a guy who, played in the trenches myself, he was the most dominant guard in the league for a long period of time. And perhaps one of the most memorable things about Randall McDaniel was his stance. I mean, obviously all of his accolades, don't get me wrong, but the way he hitched his ankle in on his stance was always just like the most perplexing thing, and it worked. And I don't know, it's kind of weird he was that successful that no one else tried to maybe mimic it or something. Right. But exactly. the guy, yeah, absolutely, belongs as one of the greatest Vikings of all time.
For sure. And obviously I never got to see him play before, but every time my grandpa watches the Vikings now, he always says, "I'm that much older, we need Randall McDaniel along that line," or whatever. I'm like, so
those lines, I mean, those were the Corey Stringer, David Dixon, Randall McDaniel, Matt Burke lines. Oh man, those guys were just monsters. Rest in peace, Corey Stringer. My number 3, and this is hard. Any of these guys, right, could be a number 1 for someone, right?
For sure.
So don't rip me for putting this guy number 3. I think he deserves it. My number 3 is Chris Carter.
Love it.
All he does is catch touchdowns. Yep. He's 12 years with the Minnesota Vikings after being released by the Eagles for obvious off the field issues that is well noted with substance abuse and what have you. And he turned his life around, which a lot of guys don't do. So that's pretty impressive in and of itself. I think he was like a 5th round pick out of Ohio State, and then comes to the Vikings, has a breakout year, and then they switch coach and they get Dennis Green. Dennis Green comes in and he becomes the guy. 12 years with Minnesota, 8-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro, 2 of those first team, 4th all-time in receiving touchdowns with 130. He had over 100 catches twice during that time. Both years was 122 catches. He had 8 1,000-yard seasons, in days where they didn't throw the ball nearly as much as they do now. Fun fact about Chris Carter is his birth name was Gradual Carter. He changed it to Chris, C-R-I-S, Chris Carter, because he idolized Chris Collinsworth, receiver. Wow. Yeah, and that's where Chris Carter came from. And on all of his, and he legally changed his name to Chris Carter. And on all of his documents, it says Chris Carter now. So he, definitely a guy I grew up. That was like my adolescence, watching Chris Carter play. And when it was him and Moss, it was just it was unstoppable. And obviously Moss's rookie year with him, Chris Carter, Randy Moss, Jake Reed, the 3-headed monsters that they was probably the most exciting Vikings season, I think, to most Vikings fans who were alive and watched that.
For sure. No, I love that pick. Obviously, I do because I have him at number 3 too.
There we go.
Yeah, and honestly, kind of just all the things that you said. Just a complete wide receiver. He kind of invented like toe drag swag. Like his sideline catch is unbelievable. The one-handed catch, like he's probably got the greatest hands in NFL history. Like unbelievable.
Insane.
And he's my mom's favorite football player of all time. So I had to put him on this list. Super fun to watch, like you said. Randy Moss, Chris Carter, like insane. Jake Reed, insane. Like all those guys in the same wide receiver room. But he's my number 3 as well. So I absolutely love Chris Carter.
All he does.
Yep.
All he does is catch touchdown passes.
For sure. Just incredible. So we're down to our top 2 now here. I'm interested to see if we have the same 2 players, maybe not in the same order, but it's going to be interesting to see what you got at number 2. So what do you got, Ryan?
My number 2, we're going to stick at the same position, and I'm going Randy Moss as my second best Viking of all time. Granted, he played many seasons outside of Minnesota and was very successful as well, but still makes it as my second greatest all-time Viking. I kind of wanted to put Chris Carter ahead of him just because of, I don't know, I feel like Chris Carter still has a soft spot for the Vikings, whereas I don't know that Randy Moss has so much of a soft spot for the Vikings anymore. But when you compare their side-by-sides, it's like you can't. And, he's second all-time in receiving touchdowns as it stands today. The crazy thing is he's still 40 touchdowns behind Jerry Rice. Like, that's how good Jerry Rice was, but that number will never get touched. He's 4th all-time in yards. Only Larry Fitzgerald, Jerry Rice, and Terrell Owens have more yards. Offensive Rookie of the Year in 1998, of course. 4-time All-Pro first team. He made this Pro Bowl 6 times. Obviously, 2007 had 23 touchdown passes, but in 2003 was his highest yardage total with 1,632 yards. So, I mean, I remember when they drafted him too, and 21st overall, all the teams passed on him. A Marshall claiming there's off the field issues, and I didn't fully. I was only like 10 years old, but so I didn't even understand what off the field issues meant. But
for sure,
I just remember when they took him, my dad was excited, so I was excited. Coming out of Marshall.
Yep. Yeah, obviously.
Sorry, number 2.
Yeah, he's going to be up towards like everyone's list because when you think of the Vikings, a lot of people are going to say Randy Moss. Especially his rookie season was so amazing and everything like that, and then he kind of just grew from there, and then obviously got traded away and everything like that. But that's a topic we don't need to talk about. We could be trading away another star wide receiver someday soon. Hopefully not. But us Vikings fans are used to that. But no, I love that at number 2. My number 2, we are a little bit different here. I'm going to go Fran Tarkenton at my number 2. Obviously, again, I didn't get to see him play, but obviously Fran Tarkenton, everyone knows Fran Tarkenton. Kind of invented the scrambling at the quarterback position, ran around, just made plays happen. Just something the league had never seen before at that time. Went to 9 Pro Bowls. He won a league MVP. Obviously, he went to all those Super Bowls with the Vikings. Couldn't get us a W, but obviously one of the greatest players in Vikings history, is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, no matter the franchise. He is the Vikings' career passing and touchdown leaders, passing yards and touchdowns. So he deserves to be up here. He could be number 1. Just depends on the list, but he is my number 2. So that's where I'm gonna have to go for now. But we are gonna move on to our number 1 slot. But Ryan, I know you have a couple honorable mentions. So who do you got in your honorable mention spots?
So this is the one, it'll probably create some controversy, but honorable mention, meaning they didn't quite make the top 5, was one of them. is Fran Tarkington.
Really?
He didn't
I
make
love
my
it.
number one. I know, it's crazy, but you know, I just I don't know. I hold that quarterback position pretty high standard, and when I look back at his career, obviously incredibly successful at the quarterback position. But you know, his highest yardage total was 78, and he didn't even crack 3,500
Right.
total passing yards.
Yep.
So I don't know. Obviously, very good. He was MVP in '75. Ton of Pro Bowls. Obviously, very very good player. I'm not knocking him at all in that sense. I think for his time, he was a really really great quarterback. Just I don't know, just not someone that I think belonged in the top 5 greatest Vikings of all time, but certainly an honorable mention.
For sure.
And my other honorable mention is Harrison Smith.
Love
You
it.
know, it's not all written for him yet. He's going into his 12th year. When you compare Hitman Harry, to guys like Troy Polamalu, who's in the Hall of Fame. You know, Polamalu played 11 years, had 32 career interceptions, 12 sacks, 14 forced fumbles. And you look at Harrison Smith's career, he has 34 career interceptions, 12 forced fumbles, so 2 less than Polamalu, and 19 and a half career sacks, already more than Polamalu. And, you know, and those are 2 really good side-by-side comparisons, considering that's 11 years for Harrison Smith and Polamalu played 11 years. He was 2017 AP first team All-Pro. He's been to 6 Pro Bowls. Harrison Smith, yeah. And in my honorable mentions as greatest Vikings of all time.
I absolutely love that. Obviously, we're still getting to watch him play, the longevity and everything like that. He's for sure a Minnesota Vikings legend, taking all these pay cuts to stay in Minnesota, where you do not see that nowadays, to be honest with you. I honestly didn't even think about that because he's still a current player, but he is going to be up there, in my opinion. As time goes on, his name is going to be getting higher and higher and higher. And I know people like Harrison Smith, Hall of Fame. He doesn't. You know, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. I think you agree with that stance. So I'll get to my honorable mentions here, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this one. And I don't know if it's just because he's an older generation. I never got to watch him play, but I'm probably.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Yep. The first defensive player ever to win the MVP, Alan Page. I'm sorry.
Wow.
He's probably your number one. Like I said, it's probably just because I didn't get to see him play at all, and I know how big of difference he made, with the Vikings and everything like that. And again, the first defensive player to win MVP, he probably should be on the list. If I had to take someone off the list, it probably would be McDaniel, but again, that's just. I don't know. It's hard to explain myself, but he probably yeah, for sure. So, what? And my other one is John Randall. So he was your number 5. John Randall is my other honorable mention, and obviously there's more names on the list as well. Like I mean, Jim Marshall,
Jared Allen.
You know,
and see if Jared Allen's entire career was in Minnesota, then he would probably be on the list. But considering he played many years in Kansas City and then went on to play for the Bears and Panthers. But Paul Krause, who's all-time league leader in interceptions, of course, too. There's you can even look at. I mean, there's so many. Scott Stillwell and Coleman, and I mean. Yeah, it's hard to. It's hard. Matt Burke, even like some serious guys that obviously belong in conversations. And again, this list is hard, man. It's hard, but it is it's your list. Who your opinion are the 5 greatest Vikings?
For sure. And we were texting that earlier. Like, there's so many people who could be in the top 5. Like, it's hard to really pin it down. And again, there's no Super Bowl rings, but there's a lot of good players in this franchise. A lot of Hall of Famers, a lot of potential Hall of Famers. So. But I think we know where you're going with number 1. You can make it, Ryan.
Hey, if it were up to me, it would just be all defensive linemen. But
No, honestly,
so yes, I'm going Alan Page, near and dear to my heart as a D lineman.
for sure.
Hall of Famer. He was selected to the Hall of Fame in '98 and '88, the year I was born. He was first round pick in 1960, 15th overall out of Notre Dame. As we know, as you already stated, he was the first MVP in the Super Bowl era to be on the defensive side of the ball,
Awesome.
which is just incredible. And one of only two players from the defensive side of the ball to actually earn MVP honors. The other one, of course, LT Lawrence Taylor, who we can agree is absolute freaking nature.
For sure.
He played in a time where they didn't record sacks, so it's kind of hard to say how many sacks he had. PFF, went and tried to convert him and said that he would have had about 148 and a half career sacks, which puts him, near the top
For sure.
in career sacks, if you can translate it that way. AP Defensive Player of the Year in 71, 5-time AP First Team All-Pro, and I'm pretty sure he's the only Vikings player to have ever earned the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was given to him in 2018 for Donald Trump. In 92, he was elected, this is his post Vikings days, as someone who's just contributed more and more to Minnesota itself. In 92, he was elected to an open seat as an associate justice for the Minnesota Supreme Court. And he became the first African American to serve on that court, which is, something. And granted, this list is only for your on-field accolades, but I think what he's done off the field, it might be even more impressive than what he had done on the field. And Alan Page, just the epitome of greatness. You think about the Purple People Eaters, he's the guy. And he will forever be not only my number one, but my favorite Viking of all time.
I love it. Yeah, he definitely deserves to be up there. Probably number one. Like I said, I just didn't get to watch him play much at all or anything like that. So
I get
a
it.
little bit more with the current times. But Randy Moss is my number one. And he was your number two. Again, I grew up with Randy Moss. One of the only first times I cried as a Viking wasn't even from a game, was from when he got traded to the Raiders. That was one of my first memories, crying over the Vikings. I was born in '95, so that was right when I was falling in love with the
Mine
Vikings.
was Gary Anderson.
Yep. So the first time I ever cried, I remember I curled up in a ball on my parents' couch was when the Vikings lost the Arizona Cardinals. The Josh McCown. Before the push out rule and everything like that, I remember I think I was 8 years old, and I remember that to this day. But one of the other times when Randy Moss got traded, because obviously you fell in love with that kind of character, that kind of football player. Just the best deep threat in NFL history. The 3 for 163 and 3 touchdowns versus the Cowboys. Obviously, I was too young for that, but you just see the meme every time when people have big games. They always post that stat line. Randy Moss, 98 Thanksgiving game. And then his rookie season, obviously, he was one of the best of all time. I think 17 touchdowns is what it was as a rookie. And then obviously went to play with the Patriots. I don't think he ever won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, did he?
No.
One of the best players of all time to never win a Super Bowl. And just an amazing football player. So he is my number one for sure. But I love the list. It's great conversation, great talking ability and everything like that. Just, again, kind of getting away from the draft talk for just a few minutes. Obviously, we're going to get some more of that a month away from today. So it's coming fast. It's coming fast.
I'm sure everyone will be totally reasonable about this and agree wholeheartedly with our list.
For sure.
At least we have that to look forward to.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love it. I am going to shout out our sponsor one more time. Sponsored by That's Badass Wood Art. Use code VC15 at checkout for 15% off your order. See his logo there in the corner. That is Louise. You can find him on Twitter, Facebook, or on his website. Just type in That's Badass Wood Art on Google. Again, his name is Luis. This does amazing work, custom family portraits, does all Minnesota sports. Just does an amazing job. Anything else you wanted to add, Ryan, before we go? Like I said, I can't wait for everyone to agree with our lists.
No, I think I think what's awesome is that we weren't exactly the same.
Right.
It's not like we
Sure.
colluded before. We talked about it beforehand to
Right.
figure out, and we just made it,
Exactly.
came in, and I think that both very good, respectable lists. So
For sure.
we'll see what the public has to say. I'm sure. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's very, very fun to talk about, but at the same time, we are going to get into more draft stuff this week. Obviously, it was the owners' meeting and everything over the weekend, so there's probably going to be a lot of reports and stuff like that. It sounds like some teams are opening business that people maybe didn't think they would be, but at the same time, a lot of smoke screens going on right now. But we are going to get to that later on in the future here. But again, I'm Brett. Ryan, thanks for hopping on. It's the Viking Central Podcast.